Hi, everyone. Welcome to the, what is the date today? The March 9th legislative meeting of the Northampton City Council's Legislative Matters Committee. I'm Laura Loisel, Chair of the committee. I'll be presiding along with Vice Chair Garrick Perry. This meeting and all participating in person and on Zoom will be audio and video recorded. The meeting can also be watched on Comcast Channel 15 or by streaming on Northampton Open Media's YouTube channel. I now call the meeting to order and we'll take a roll, please, after Laura, after which we'll move on to our agenda.
Councillor Loisel,
Here.
Councillor Perry,
Here.
Councillor Maori,
Here.
Councillor Stratton.
Here.
Okay, I see I did that in the wrong order. I'm supposed to do the announcement after we do the order and roll call, but okay, next time. And we're going to start with public comment. And I guess if anybody online wants to have public comment, please raise your hand. And I'm sure, Claudia, did you want to? Okay, please feel free.
Here to express my concern about the manner in which my request.
Oh.
You have to turn the microphone.
Yeah, and say your name and.
Is it on? It's not.
Great.
Okay. Claudia Lefko, 40 Valley Street. I'm here to express my concern about the manner in which my request to be put on the agenda of this committee was handled. I assume there's a process, but Councillor Loisel offered no guidance. You have, she wrote me, you have, the committee, received information about all the steps taken with regard to these questions. That information seems to have been copies of emails from Carolyn Mish in the planning department. It's true that neither MC3 nor the Conservation Committee has been, quote unquote, concerned about this encroachment. Neither has the planning office. That there's a sizable encroachment is not in question. It's obvious from the property maps. Nonetheless, despite this breach of the conservation agreement, the committee said, the Conservation Committee, that they will act only and when MC3, the holder of the conservation restriction, asks them to intervene. There are reasons why MC3 has been reluctant to confront the Nash-Lewis household about this encroachment. The question for this committee is whether, despite obvious violations, there is a need for a city ordinance. I have worked my way through the chain of command in the bureaucracy, first asking MC3, then the Conservation Commission, and finally the Planning Office to step in to either mediate this problem or uphold the legal boundaries of the concerned land on Montview. This committee and the possibility of a city ordinance upholding the restriction by enforcing state regulations is, as I see it, my last hope and the last step. Who decided and how that this is not something important enough for this committee to be considered? And who decided against any presentation from concerned citizens to the committee? Was it an executive decision by the chair? Did members of this committee talk with any MC Board 3 members? Was there a discussion and vote deciding encroachment was not a relevant issue for this committee? Is there a record of all this? Does the committee think the public interest is served when residents are denied information, when we're not guided through the proper process that would enable us to participate in meaningful ways in decision-making on matters of public interest? I'm going to finish by pointing out that laws are meant to be enforced whether anyone, quote unquote, complains or not. I think, sadly, we're seeing what happens when people in power ignore the very rules and regulations that help keep a community or a country functioning in the best interests of everyone. I am going to leave you this, including the citation of the law from the message. Thanks for your.
Thank you, Claudia. So I know that, let me just, anybody online want to speak? I don't think so. No hands. Okay. So, I know that, oh, she left. I was gonna see if we should talk about it with her, but she left. So maybe not. Okay. Okay. All right. To make approval of the minutes from the previous meetings, which I think it's more than one set of minutes. It's from, oh, okay. I'm supposed to read this. Minutes from the Committee on Legislative Matters, 11/10/25. And then the Joint Planning Board Legislative Matters minutes, 7/17/25. And then the Committee on Legislative Matters organizational meeting, 2/9/26. I'm wondering if we should take these all at once or one at a time.
We could take them all. I move
Okay.
to approve all of the minutes stated.
Okay, thank you. And so Counselor Maori
Second.
makes the motion to approve and
Yeah, and then I'll
And-
second.
Counselor
and-
Perry seconds. Does anybody have any changes to any of the minutes or fixes or corrections? No? Okay. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yeah, we can do an aye vote.
Yeah.
Okay. Any opposed? No. Okay, thank you all. And the next thing is a discussion with Carolyn Mish. So welcome, welcome, Director Mish. Okay, I have to get my formality going.
Oh, so there's a button, yeah,
Yes. I was
Okay.
gonna tell her there's a button.
yeah. Oh, that's great that they plugged it in.
Yes.
Talk-
I had a backup for the planning board, long extension cord and everything, but this is much more discreet, so that's good.
Can I just frame this a little bit?
Sure.
Before you start, is just so everybody knows, this body will consider zoning ordinances, and those proposals can come here in multiple ways. So we thought it would be helpful to, a couple of these ordinances, I think, as it said in the agenda, have been on the table various ways for a while. And we thought it would be helpful to go through these as examples of how matters might come before us and our various options.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you for coming to help us understand this.
Thanks for having me. So good afternoon. I thought, as Councilor Loisel mentioned, that before we have formal introductions of zoning and presentations about ordinances, I thought it would make sense to go over with the new council and new arrangement of committees. There are the procedures for the way zoning ordinance amendments are processed and ultimately adopted. And the zoning ordinance is a code of ordinances that is one regulatory mechanism for implementing the land use policies that have been adopted in the Sustainable Northampton Plan. And so one of the things we do in our office is develop and work with different constituencies to develop regulations that move us towards implementation of the plan. And there are other tools that can be used as well, policy modifications or other things to help facilitate implementation of the goals and objectives in the adopted plan. But zoning is one very important piece of that. It really dictates how and where and what kinds of land uses take place in the city, and sort of all the parameters around how land use should function in order to achieve our goals. And typically zoning ordinance amendments can be brought forward in multiple ways. So the planning board can present an ordinance amendment. City council as a body can present a proposed ordinance amendment. other interested parties can work with a body, an ordinance, city council or the planning board or the zoning board, and the zoning board is also a body that can bring an ordinance amendment. And then individually, there is a provision in state statute for a resident who wants to petition for their own personal property to be amended, so a map change, for example. And also, a very small number of residents can sign a petition to be to present to city council to then be forwarded on to be on an agenda. All of the ways that ordinances can be introduced all come to city council, and by statute, all have to be referred out for public hearing. And the official public hearing has to be held by the planning board and by the city council, or in Northampton, in many cases, a designated subcommittee of the city council. So legislative matters is that designated subcommittee. So legislative matters and the planning board would host a public hearing. Oftentimes, if it makes sense, the planning board and legislative matters committee hold a joint public hearing. It helps facilitate discussion so both bodies can hear what the other body is thinking about or hearing from different public constituencies. And also it helps in terms of not requiring people to go to too many different meetings to talk about the same subject, to make sure that what their concerns are about or what they want to recommend to the body, they don't have to do that on multiple occasions. Sometimes it doesn't work out and there's just separate public hearings. Ultimately, the recommendations are made from each of those bodies, and that filters back to city council. And then city council as a whole votes on that particular matter. And then it goes, and then it's adopted once that is, and then there's administrative procedures at the council clerk and city clerk level, but basically once the city council votes, it's an ordinance. So that's on that piece, we, the planning board, what we've done typically is, there are different ways that the long range plan can be implemented. Some communities just hire a consultant and say, change your zoning ordinance so that it's consistent with the plan. And so the consultant goes away and comes back with this huge book and says, here it is. And then that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it, the sort of complete opposite, is an incremental approach, which is typically what we've done in Northampton. Is we deliberate on different pieces of ordinances to implement the code, and as things change, adjustments are made. And so it makes it easier being in a city that you can make those adjustments if things aren't quite working out, or if another approach has to be taken. And so the planning board has worked, in the existing context of the plan and the ordinances, and oftentimes sees things that aren't working. So if something needs a public hearing, that item, that might generate discussion about possible zoning amendments. And so the two items in front of you as sort of discussion points are items that the planning board has been looking at at various times, or at least has been in the background.
Could we possibly ask questions just about what you've said so far? Okay.
Of course.
Because I do have one question about the process. When you said, when you talked about the bodies that can bring zoning changes or ordinances to the floor, you said planning board. What about the planning department and planning department staff?
So technically, it's really comes from the planning board. So
Okay, so
not individually as a department, unless it's authorized in a charter. And in Northampton's case, it's not. So we work through the planning board.
okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions based so far? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
So the first ordinance that the planning board is each year is sort of considered different ordinances. This year, at the beginning so far, there's been an item that the planning board has discussed fairly regularly over the last couple of years, certainly since the two-family by right ordinances were adopted in 2022, about the fact that there are still some instances in which a property owner needs to come to the planning board for site plan or review for the creation of a two-family, even though it's a use that's allowed by right. There's a provision that says, well, if it's a certain size, over 2,000 square feet, it needs to come to the planning board, whether or not it meets all the specific criteria that were adopted in 2022, saying, if you're going to do a two-family, design it like this, include parking in this location, have, covered entries that face the street and so forth. There's a section of the ordinance that's very prescriptive about how two families should be designed. And that's been in the books since 2022, but at the same time, if someone is coming forward, there's another section of the zoning that says only single family homes are exempt from that 2,000 square foot threshold for a site plan review. And that's because single family homes are sort of the ultimate gold standard for development in the Commonwealth. So you can basically do anything if you're building a single family home. So that's sort of carried forward and been on the books for decades in Northampton. And so that's the thing that continues to trigger, even if you're building two 1,100 square foot units as a duplex, that's over 2,000 square feet. So you need to come to the planning board. So this first ordinance that the board has been talking about is removing or allowing the exemption from site plan review for two families that are over 2,000 square feet. So that standard for site plan review for projects that result in more than 2,000 square feet of new construction is for all types of uses: industrial, retail, restaurant, whatever commercial use, and residential, multifamily, anything over two family has that trigger. Yeah.
Were you saying though that that would not be triggered if it was a 2,000 square foot single family? So that single family is the unique exception to the 2,000 square foot.
Yes. Yep. So, we do have examples of 12,000 square foot single family homes in Northampton. And, that's certainly went through without any review. So the question has been, well, we're really trying to encourage and allow these sort of modest additions and new units, but this really creates an additional hurdle for people trying to create that second unit. If they also have to come to this planning board, it's time, it's money for the permit review. And then on the other side, the planning board's reviewing it. And again, site plan is only about the functionality of a project, not whether or not that's an appropriate use in that location. So they can't really turn down any site plan project unless it's not meeting one of the technical standards in site plan. They can't turn it down because someone says, I don't want two units next to me. That's just not a valid reason to deny a site plan. And it's sometimes can be confusing for the public. They're notified of the site plan review. They might attend the meeting. They might not quite understand why it's a site plan. And maybe they just don't want a second unit next to them, but that's not an option for the planning board. And so you get a little bit of confusion and extra effort on the part of all of those people who are notified, who really, can talk about potential impacts of a project, but mostly those things can be mitigated. And many times people are sort of confused about why this is even a public hearing process. if ultimately this is what we're trying to accomplish, is to allow these units. So this one ordinance goes through and sort of identifies, red lines all the sections of the code that would have to be modified to eliminate that trigger for site plan review for a two-family. And I think that's pretty straightforward. The planning board has been dealing with this for 4 years now and really feels like this is an important change. So this hasn't, neither of these have been introduced, but I just sort of wanted to use this as a platform to say, these are the kinds of things that would be coming forward that then would be referred out to legislative matters for public hearing, that then would go back to city council for review. So I can stop there before I go to the next one if you have any questions.
Anybody have any questions? Councilor Miori?
Yeah, thank you. So if there's multiple units, there's no cap on requiring a site plan. Like what if there's, more like 6 or 7 units or?
So this is only addressing 2 units. So the exemption in section 11 says projects requiring site plan approval, parentheses, excluding, right now it says excluding single family. My recommendation would be single or two family. But that means that everything else, whether it's commercial, multifamily, 3 units or more, or all the other there are other triggers in the ordinance that require a site plan review. If you're adding more than 6 parking spaces to a property, if you're sometimes it's a use that might trigger site plan to make sure that the site functions appropriately. So, or if you're adding, for example, 2 driveway curb cuts to a parcel, that triggers site plan. All of those would stay the same. This is really just about the creation of a 2-family and affording that the same exemption that single families are afforded.
Great, thank you.
So I'm wondering, so this is sort of a case study kind of thing.
Yeah.
Once you ultimately, it ends up before us, we could ask many questions. Seems like maybe not worth it now, but I don't know. What do you all think?
Sorry.
To talk about, I'm just wondering about like the content. Do we want to go deeply into the content?
Yeah, no, I don't feel the need to personally, but I just wanted to say that, we can, some amount of us can also be a co-sponsor as well if they wanted.
Sure.
And then you may want to
Oh, yeah.
know more, but at this juncture, I don't feel that way, but maybe others do.
Yeah. Yeah. Councilor Stratton.
Well, I do want to avoid not really discussing the meat of this today because it wasn't, on the agenda as an item to make a decision on. But for example, I'm just pulling up the duplex site plan from Ryan Road and Gilrain that was, earlier this year. And I noted the comment that it's not the permission to build, it's the functionality of the site. And, I think in many ways, the things that I was concerned about with that actually were the functionality, particularly were people going to end up parking on the street rather than blocking their other car in. And, I think maybe there's a sense that these hearings don't cover the aspect of it that are the concern because the planning board can't, refuse the project. In this case, my functional concern is actually something that's mandated by the zoning code. So it's not something the developer chose to do. In fact, the developer originally wanted to do something else and they were told they couldn't. And so, a functional hearing, okay, the code says they have to do it this way, and maybe that's not hitting the right issue. I think the trade-off, though, is that there is some public awareness of what's going on and how it got approved, and people don't just see a hole being dug in the ground the next day, or in this case, a little house being taken down and 2 units built. Just another thought I have is, possibly rather than, okay, so it is an extra hoop for someone to jump through if they're going to build a duplex rather than a single, and we do want more, we want more sensible housing. A thought experiment in my head is maybe increase the threshold rather than remove it. But, I'm not immediately, I pulled this up because I wanted to see the size of these units and I'm not seeing them there. So that's a bad example for this. But I think I'm just saying that for me, this is a subject that's going to need some ongoing thought, and maybe that's just where I'll leave it today. But I understand where the director's coming from. We're not wanting to put roadblocks in terms of increasing the effective housing. I would I would love if there was a way we could waive site plan if we'd be achieving what we call the market rate affordable units, which are the missing middle. And I don't know that there's a way we can write that, but yeah, I think I will let go of this for today, but it's a subject I'm continuing to think about a lot.
Thank you for those comments. Did you want to respond to anything?
No, I mean, I would just say you brought up the example of, well, what if people park in the street instead of on the driveway? And that's just allowed everywhere in the city. So that wouldn't really be an issue anyway for the planning board to review in a site plan. And then, of course, when people come to start building a single family home, people in the neighborhood don't necessarily know what's happening unless they call the building department either. So that's why I'm thinking, that's what the planning board is sort of looking at, is weighing, like, why are we keeping single family home only as sort of the only thing that can that doesn't need that additional review.
If I might just, there are neighborhoods where you have a lot of street parking. Yes, it's technically legal almost everywhere, including places where it would be a extremely bad idea. I mean, Drury Lane or something. But this is not a street where people parking on the street had really been an incumbent thing because people had enough driveway space. And now we're basically saying in the code that you can't build as much driveway space as your neighbors have. They have relatively minimal. I mean, it's sequential off-street parking. You have one garage spot and you have one spot in front of it. And these are going to be typically two-income households, each of these. And so that creates a brand new pattern on a fairly narrow, confined street that hadn't had that pattern there before. If this were going in on, somewhere over by the high school or something, that whole neighborhood, Round Hill, completely different story because that's already an incumbent pattern. Which of course gets into the question of, what makes sense in different parts of the city. But again, that's not on the agenda today, so I will let go of it.
Thank you. Do you want to talk about the next one, or have you said what you, yeah?
So the next one, the board definitely has not finished discussing this one, but it's come up in different scenarios, and it's about reevaluating the side yard setback requirements in the urban residential B district. They've been 15 feet for a long time, since the 70s, I would say, probably, maybe 80s. However, back in 2013, the lot dimension requirements sort of narrowed from a 75-foot wide lot to a 50-foot wide lot allowance. But the side setbacks didn't change proportionally. And so the impetus of this sort of conversation is, does it make sense to really reevaluate that and think about allowing more flexibility in the build out of structures, especially now that there is a growing demand for single level living, and which means you need a little bit of a wider footprint as opposed to skinny and tall, which you can build a skinny and tall on a 50-foot wide lot. But our population actually is aging, and it has been for a while. And so I had an example of someone who called last week, who's looking at a parcel that was created off of Hatfield Street. And the house plan that he was looking at wouldn't fit within the setbacks for this parcel, and wanted to know if there was any wiggle room or anything. And so I had to explain, no, but that we were starting this conversation, and that may not be the way it is forever, but right now that's all that we had. So it's definitely not clear. I think in this ordinance, the proposed red line is 12 feet of setback on either side. The board talked about 10 feet. the board wants to continue to talk about this and also realizes that this is a broader conversation for, public input on that. There are communities around. Amherst has a 10-foot side setback closer in around its center. Springfield, other communities in the valley also have 5 or 10-foot side setbacks in more of the urban core. And that's where we're talking about, is just urban residential B, not anywhere else. Urban residential C is already a 10-foot side setback. So it would match that if it went to 10. So anyway, this one is more of an example of something that really needs more public discussion. And the board even wants to have it, talk about it more before, even hosting public comments about that. So, yeah.
Is there a way to have public discussion around something before it's actually a proposed ordinance?
For sure.
So you
Yeah.
do that at the planning
Mhm.
board?
Yeah. And we can work with counselors, especially in the affected wards, to help host those community conversations. Yep.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, I mean, is this we change the code and then everybody gets it? Is there any way to have apply for a variance or something? I mean, it seems to me if you have 50 feet of frontage and you take 15 off each side, now you can build a house that's 20 feet wide, which is completely impractical. But, if you happen to have 100 feet of frontage and now somebody's going to build something that's 80 feet wide, that's sort of like, I mean, if you drop it to 10 feet or something, that really dominates the lot kind of. So in the mechanics of this, is there a way to say that, well, it's 12 feet, but you can petition for 10 or something? Or we really have to have one consistent rule for all of these, I guess, URB or
URB.
lots?
Yeah, so there would be a term, it would be a special permit, not a variance. A variance is a very specific thing that is not meant for a subjective sort of or an evaluative review based on conditions. Variances are really only granted for circumstances where the property has no other viable use unless there's some kind of waiver granted from the zoning. You need to make sure that the zoning is uniformly consistent. If you set up rules, for example, for a special permit, you just need to make sure that the permit criteria is rational and can potentially be used by everyone in the district the same way. It's not just setbacks that dictate how a property is used. So there's an open space requirement. There's a maximum amount of parking in the front between the structure and the street. There are also, I'm trying to think in your 100-foot wide example, if it's just a single family home, then there wouldn't be any other sort of design criteria. Once you get into a 2-family, then there are some other triggers that would dictate the massing and the facade treatments and those kinds of things. But it becomes much more difficult to write something that's rational and can be applied across the board when you start introducing a special permit for X, Y, or Z condition. You want to be very specific. So.
Any other questions? Oh, and then you.
So that filing on Lyman Road going down into the meadows, that would be a lot where you basically can't build on it right now. So that's a variance because you need that, or I mean, it's not like completely filed yet, but it's.
It is not. I will say this very clearly. It does not qualify for a variance. That is an interest in wanting to do something that the person wants to do as opposed to comply with the ordinance. So they're trying to seek a path of a variance, but There are very specific criteria in the state statute that allow for a variance, and you have to show that there's no other viable use of the property. It's something unique to that property that's doesn't affect other properties in the zone similarly.
So when you say no other viable use, it's not that you just couldn't build a house on it, it's you couldn't do anything with it.
You couldn't do anything with it. In this case, the applicant has said multifamily. It's not clear what that means. But we've gotten a permit has already previously been approved on that property for a single family house.
Mm.
So it's clear that a single family house can fit on the property.
Okay, I had the wrong recollection, like just anything at all would be falling down the hill, but okay. I had the wrong record. Thank you.
Counselor Maori?
So I know this is a work in progress, but I'm curious about how this would, or the board sees it would impact permeability and other kind of requirements or considerations. I think in a way it could help with tree preservation if you're trying to kind of, well, it depends. Like if you have more to work with, it's hard to know, I guess, but
Right.
I think it could impact some of the other kind of requirements we have in terms of permeable spaces, which are going to be less in URB anyway, but.
Yeah, so you still need to maintain the minimum open space requirement, which in the URB district is 40% of the parcel.
Oh, okay, so that doesn't change.
Right.
Okay, got it.
But it does allow for that flexibility. So for example, if you had a tree on one side, but you also need a driveway, maybe you can massage things a little bit to be closer to one side and allow more space for that tree or something like that. You might be able to shift more to the front or to the rear potentially, but wider. It ultimately gives more flexibility. I will say the other piece that makes, I'm going to introduce another topic, but it just sort of shows that there's a lot of interwoven pieces of the zoning. In the URB district, there's also a provision for what we call reduced lot line development, and it requires that you have at least, and it doesn't use lot lines, but 20 feet between the structures, because it was determined that, and so effectively, if you think about that, that means a 10-foot side setback for each structure if there's 20 feet of space in between each one. So already in the URB district, we have a provision for that, but it comes in under a different scenario if you're building, if you have a larger lot, like 100-foot wide lot, and you wanted to divide it into two, you could create a reduced lot line and get to those 10 feet.
Right.
If you had, enough to divide that. So already we're essentially treating some people differently in that instance. And this would, if we went to 10 feet, would sort of create more uniformity in that regard, because then it allows everybody to have the 10 feet.
Did you have questions?
I don't.
I wanted to ask you in general, like, how is it that how do you work in the Sustainable Northampton Plan when you're thinking about zoning changes? You know what I mean? It just must be hard. I'm assuming that it's a plan that you try to keep going. And do you sit there and, just tell me how you do that.
It depends on the day. So, there are more than just the plan, but so a lot of when we're talking about housing and allowing and looking at ways to address or allow for more attainable housing, or that Councilor Stratton was referring to, is wouldn't it be great if there was some way we could say, well, this house is going to be attainable for people in this income level. And that's been an overarching goal, because for years we've had issues with not building enough housing and having an affordability problem that continues to, to grow and to sort of strain the system. And so as it relates to something like this, we're looking at creative ways, looking at what other communities are doing, looking at, regulations that are coming out or being discussed at the state level to encourage a range of different housing options for people. And so, that's one of the things when we're tinkering with the zoning as it relates to housing units, is thinking about, what does the plan say? Well, we're really trying to get at that piece, to allow options for people to live in different parts of the city and in different types of housing. So like single level living, or, if you can get 2 units on a property by allowing a little bit more flexibility in the setback, then people can go in and maybe it's more affordable to split the land cost across 2 units. And then now you got options for people who might not have otherwise had that because, for example, you have a little bit more wiggle room to add a second unit on a parcel. But it's different for each type of zoning amendment. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just to, trying to organize my thoughts here. So we do have in places in the zoning, special permits for things that are explicitly affordable housing. I mean, low income housing. I think there's situations where the amount of frontage needed on a public street is reduced if you're doing, a larger development that way. Is there sort of a legal concept of mid-market housing that even could be a criteria? That's sort of one of 3 points. I don't know if we should do these back and forth. Can we? Or okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably not, because
that was my
mid-market
thought.
to you is different from somebody else. And also, frankly, you might be blown away about what mid-market actually is right now, because the costs continue to rise. But mostly it's because when we do affordable housing, that is deed restricted, and it's deed restricted for people making no more than 80% of the area median income, and it carries a tail with it. Like, someone has to monitor that so that forever that person then doesn't reap the benefits of equity beyond, what they were able to get, so that it's affordable to the next person coming up. And so that is, something that is very specifically defined, and that we track for, I mean, it's 99 years is what our requirement is, that those units stay affordable for those folks.
Which along with the cost of constructing anything, I mean, this is why we see a lot of $600,000 to $700,000 condos, and we see very few like 3-bedroom homes under 400,000, which is the hole in the market where we need. And honestly, the reason I ended up in the neighborhood I did is because that's where there still were some of those. One of the things that even I'm having a little trouble finding clarity on is what the zoning is where. I went digging around in file cabinets, and I think I found a 2019 zoning map, and maybe that's still mostly current. The assessor's map, the interactive one, it seems a little more tuned towards the specific properties, and I'm just sort of, I think people maybe don't have a real clear idea of what the zoning is in different parts of the city. And one of the things that stands out in my mind is, just the proximity to a bus route or anything influence that. Or at least directions that I think it would be interesting to be thinking in as a community. But to pull this back to a question, what is the best reference right now to, if you're just curious, if I wanted to know, what is my neighborhood zoned?
Yeah, so we recently updated the zoning map because the static PDF files online were very difficult to read. And so the interactive map, you can click and geographically it'll pop up. So if you click on a zone, and not just the parcel, but it'll highlight the entire area that's within that zone. So you can find out that way.
And where is that?
On the planning page, under the map section.
Okay, I'll have to look.
So a Google Earth map section where you can make your own maps and download the zoning file so that you can sort of color it the way you want it and have the zones pop, whatever way makes you float your boat, I guess.
I figured out how to get parcel outlines. I need to go looking for that, but that sounds very interesting. Thank you.
Sounds like you're going to have a lot of fun. Did you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay. I wanted to ask another question. Wait. Do you know where or vague idea of like approximately where in the city most of the housing has been created in the last 5 years?
Oh, in the last 5 years. Um, probably within the B and C districts, and then also at the state hospital, former state hospital,
Oh,
I
yeah.
would say. Yeah. And then just to orient you, so urban residential C is really, except for a couple of exceptions, is really sort of around the core downtown area. So a little bit of sort of a donut around downtown. And then just beyond that is urban residential B that floods towards Florence Center, and around Florence Center is B.
Mhm.
We have a couple of parcels of C out off of Jackson Street, and then River Run is also urban residential C. But those are the districts where, we're encouraging housing on existing infrastructure, where there are bus routes, where there's close access to bike paths and sidewalks and pedestrian access to downtown schools, libraries, that kind of thing.
But are there still lots that are buildable? In other words,
Mhm.
yes, there are.
Yes.
Okay.
So when they're not, a dime a dozen, but one of the things in 2013, when we reduced the lot size requirement in the B and C A, B and C district, that allowed people who had larger lots to carve off lots that were 50 feet wide. Maybe they had a huge parcel. They didn't need all of that land. Maybe they needed income because they were trying to age in place and made some modifications. So they've sold off parcels. I'll give you an example. Urban residential B on Riverside Drive is urban residential B. The VFW, I don't know if it may be the other one, on Riverside Drive is
American Legion?
yes,
Yeah.
American Legion, sorry, sold off a piece of property because they were struggling financially. Now they sold off another piece on the other side. I mean, that was like huge parking all around. So then I believe they're in the process, or at least it was on the market to sell the rest of it. So those are things that sometimes that pop up every once in a while. But that provides an opportunity to re-envision that section of Riverside Drive as not just, asphalt and devoid of people and houses, but
Well, and presumably they would sell those lots and then maybe they'd be a single family house. So maybe there'd be multiple single family houses, but there would be no public hearing for that because,
it depends.
Oh, okay.
So it depends, if it's single family, no. If it's two family, maybe not. But if it's anything more than two, then yes, it would trigger.
no, I mean, if
site
it's a
plan.
single family, like you could
Yeah.
have 3 single
Sure,
families
sure.
and those would just be built.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
I think I have one more question. Do you have a timeline by which you're thinking just generally you might introduce these two or?
Yeah, I mean, the two family exemption from the 2,000 square feet, I would say, I think the planning board is ready to submit that. So that might come pretty soon. Like I mentioned, the side setback, both the planning board wants to sort of talk through that a little bit more. And also I'd probably want to work with counselors who have URB districts in their wards and have some public discussion about that.
I'd be interested in when these come come forward, like hearing, why wouldn't somebody want this? Because sometimes I just don't know why, I hear you saying why it's important, but
Yeah.
why wouldn't somebody want it would be a good thing to know.
Yeah. I mean, what we hear is it's change, it's a different look in your street. If someone does an addition and they can come closer than what you thought they could come, and that's a change. And, ultimately, our neighborhoods have built out decade after decade in different ways, and there are new units that are sprinkled in throughout. So not every neighborhoods really aren't uniform
Yeah.
for style, but it takes adjustment. And there is concern about impacts to runoff if there's some, if you're 5 feet closer potentially, but that's all. I mean, you can't direct water onto your neighbor's property anyway. So even if you were 15 feet, you can't do it just because you're 10 feet, if that's the change.
Thank you. Yes.
I mean, I think one of the perceived concerns that comes up often is that when there's more development in a neighborhood, or a perception that there's development pressure, that it's driving up property values there and assessments, and then people's taxes go up. So someone bought into a neighborhood when maybe it was relatively affordable, and now they feel they're having trouble, holding onto their house. I mean, the Prop 2.5 applies to the city's overall collection. Somebody's property taxes, could theoretically go up 5 or 10% in 1 year. And some people's property taxes actually go down elsewhere in the city when that happens. And then, there's things like just traffic volume, parking. So, there's a variety of concerns, and the degree to which building something new drives up existing property values, that's maybe takes a little work to demonstrate, but it is something that's often thought of, and it's a topic that I do think needs to be taken into account. But, certainly there are, areas of the city that are very convenient that have low density. And that is a balance for building high density in areas of the city that are inconvenient. So there's, you please one person and you create difficulty for another. And that's the reality of government.
That is so true. Yeah.
Well, I'm
Go.
pretty, oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, my observations have been that tension between kind of hyper localized individual situations, but the nature of zoning having to be fair, kind of a blanket policy, and sometimes not really even using the right language to describe what the discomfort is.
Yeah.
It's often what are like it's often design elements. But then the whole project can be projected as, problematic. And if you really break it down with residents, it's interesting. But yeah, that tension between resisting the idea of a kind of uniform policy.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that makes me have one more question, which is, are there any height restrictions in our city?
Yes.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. Okay.
Yes. And so in particular, let's take urban residential B, for example, is 35 feet is the maximum height, and it's measured to the midpoint of a peaked roof,
Uh-huh.
to the average finished grade, or if it's a flat roof, then it's to that roof beam
Okay.
at 35 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I found the map you mentioned, which is wonderful. Now I have that beside the assessor's map that I was very familiar with. Could you just give a real quick explanation of what the water supply districts change in terms of rules? Like the stormwater becomes more strict, or impervious area or something, or?
Impervious area, so the total amount of impervious surface well, two things. One is lot size goes way up for the purposes of having more area on your property to infiltrate groundwater for the drinking water supply source. And in it's different drinking water supplies in different sections of the city. So there's also, lot size, and then total area of lot coverage to, again, enable enough area on the land for the water to infiltrate there instead of shedding off. Those are the primary changes. I would also say, sort of going back to this, what are, the concerns of folks and what we need to think about in terms of balance is, other things that we hear, well, someone's going to cut a tree down because they're going to build, it allows them to build closer. And so we don't want those trees to come down. Trees can be cut by anybody, any property owner at any time. There's no provision to prevent that. So, it's not, and so yes, it can be stark and striking and, but we want to look at, and we do have tree planting requirements for actually when you're coming in for site plan, if you're taking a mature tree down, those folks who are actually providing housing that trigger site plan are the ones who have to replant trees. Whereas if you just are a property owner and you feel like you don't want to deal with a leaf litter, you can cut the tree and you don't have to replant. And so, there's that tension too. Like we're asking people, we really need new housing. We're asking people to come through site plan review, and those people also have to replace the trees that they're removing. Whereas other folks who don't trigger site plan, they're not providing new housing, but they're also removing trees, as an example, is sort of trying to look at sort of all of the rules as a package and sort of how it affects people differently. But we do the other piece of sort of thinking about, well, new housing drives up, the cost and taxes for everybody else. The reality is that the more impediments we have to housing, the housing desirability or people wanting to live in Northampton has not waned since I've been here and for more than 30 years. And so the more impediments you have to housing restricts the ability to build, which is really what raises the housing costs, not really that one instance of a new project in a neighborhood.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anything else you want to say? I found this very helpful and really appreciate you coming, and we'll look forward to working with you in the future.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Carolyn.
So the next matter is on the agenda is set meeting schedule and format for 2026, 2027. And so I think Laura gave us a proposed draft, which I have to call up. And has everybody had a chance to take a look at it? Does it look good? Yep.
Yes.
Oh, 5:30. Okay. So, well, that's the question. We were talking about maybe switching it to 6, maybe doing that in the winter or I think there was something about you wanting to bike ride, but which I totally get.
I mean, I would be in favor of 6. It makes it more of an evening meeting, and I think probably, works a little better for citizen participation. But if that's going to be difficult for people, I understand.
Well, you like 6 better, am I right?
I mean, I could make 5:30, but 6, I do a drive, but
Yeah.
yeah. What do you, Rachel?
What do you have?
I mean, yeah, I could do either. I think 5:30 is a little, is a little bit, all things being equal, is a little better.
Your preference?
Well, just depending on the length of the meeting. I mean, if you have a really long meeting on a Monday,
Yeah.
starting a half an hour earlier, but I don't have a strong preference. And yeah, the Monday meetings are tough with the holidays. We run into that a lot and posting the agenda, and
If
all
we-
that. So, but it looks like you accounted for all that. Okay. Okay. So that's the only one. Yeah. But, 6, yeah.
Well, I kind of get where you are coming from too, Rachel, with kids at the house as well. When it drags on,
Yeah.
But
But yeah, really either way. It's yeah, you get it. But it drags on either way.
right?
Yeah.
5:30 or 6.
I have no preference on this. So,
Oh, interesting.
and so you're saying, I thought you had a hard time getting here, but it was 5. That was
5, yeah, I cannot do 5.
possible.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
5:30 you
5:30,
can.
I can make that.
And
Thinking, yeah, either way. How about just curious about Laura, maybe.
Yeah.
Waiting all day today. Oh,
Well, maybe,
yes.
Okay.
oh, okay.
Yeah, because she can't really, you don't have enough time to go home. Excuse me, I'm talking. out of-
Earlier is always better for me. So
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
I was thinking about that as well as I was rushing to get here. So, let's go with 5:30.
Okay,
And
let's
then
go
if
with,
if we need to change, I'm down with it.
okay, so we'll go with 5:30. And what do we do about these Columbus days? Just deal with it when it gets closer?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
All right. And then I wanted to talk about, format or whatever. Like, I want to know what people think about, or in you who have experience, how to do public comment for a small committee like this. Like when Claudia was here, could we have had a conversation? I'd like to know what people think about that. And yeah, feels weird to have somebody come to the small group, say something, and then we all just say thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rachel.
I was just going to say, you as chair, we can talk about we all prefer as a committee, but you as chair actually in subcommittees have a lot of latitude. You can have a more back and forth. You can have back and forth that you can't have in full council. So it's really, I mean, it's really up to the chair, although of course the committee can weigh in. There's not really,
And I think you could always have general discussion about the rules for putting something on the agenda as opposed to, addressing the specific situation she was talking about, what the normal process is, because that seemed to be her complaint that something didn't get on the agenda.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I think Claudia actually thought that there had been a negative decision made to not have her item on the agenda. And I think that that was based in a not understanding that something only gets on the agenda when it's referred by the council or one of us, asked to put it on. So there isn't really a direct individual citizen path to put something on the agenda.
Right.
Anyone can email us, and if one of us says we want to put that on the agenda, it does tie into a little bit that there was a mention of citizen initiative petition as a means of kicking something off, and we had one last fall, and I was very troubled that the presenter never really got to present. They never really got to step beyond public comment, show a slide deck, really present their proposal. It was just, I mean, it was considered, shall we say, an unwelcome proposal.
Did it happen
And,
in public comment or?
And they never really got to present it the way that a proposal coming in from inside government would have been. And I found that pretty troubling, both in terms of process and somewhat agreeing with what they were bringing. There is this tradition that we don't respond to public comment. And I think a lot of that is really about just not wanting to get dragged into the weeds, particularly with an item that's not on the agenda. There is the legal concern that you don't want to get deeply into a topic that's not on the agenda, but that's not a hard line for unanticipated things and minor coverage. I'll hand it back to others for the moment.
oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that much like Rachel said, that it is up to your discretion. And so I could see some points of if there's public comment about general things, but for instance, if people were here for Director Mish's presentation and maybe had a question, I could see that as well being things. It really is about how you feel. I do agree with Chris that we're trying not to get in the weeds here. These are not items that we're voting on or on our agenda. And I also worry about a back and forth. I'm not really interested in trying to go back and forth with someone, but I trust your judgment to not allow that to happen. So whatever you feel comfortable with for me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, the way that we've done it is just to remain fair is to kind of set that expectation at the beginning of the meeting, so not change it. So if you were going to, for example, going to have some back and forth with Claudia, then if someone else came in, you would have to do that. So generally be around the topic. Like if it was a topic we anticipated, we'll say we'll do one round of questions or something like that, or even you can extend public comment time to, whatever you want, like 3 minutes or more. But the main factor in changing all that is to really set it before people start talking, so it doesn't look like a bias. And you can do, we can agree on that as a committee, but also the chair can just look at the agenda and say, I think there's going to be a lot of questions here, and I'm going to allow, you can allow 1 or 2 question periods, or you can structure it, but just to do it before, and if possible, put it on the agenda, just to kind of make it seem more, right, yeah, fair.
Well, it would be my goal to be flexible, but I am kind of learning, so I might forget.
Yeah.
Or I might be too flexible, so I'm happy to have feedback, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the other challenges, and I very much want to have a more interactive government that involves the public more, listens to the public more. One of the challenges is that people bring their concern where they see an opportunity, and it's not always the place where the concern can be addressed. So sometimes we're kind of sitting here kind of stone-faced, like, I share your concern, but this is not the place we can do anything about it, and maybe not even having a good chance to explain that. And so, I mean, that topic, for example, okay, there is this large bush that is overflowing from a private property onto the conservation property. And if the relevant decision makers said that bush was a problem, the city already has the power to deal with it. It's not missing legislation. It's that the people who have the power to decide don't think that bush is inappropriate vegetation in the conservation area. And I don't know that it would be impossible, but it would be very weird for the city council to reach in and say that, no, whatever species of shrub that is not allowed in a conservation area. That would be a very weird legislative decision.
Yeah, and just so you, on that score, just so you know, I was really, Claudia sent me a note saying, asking, requesting this be put on the agenda. I spoke with Alan Seawald and he told me, you don't have to put anything on the agenda you don't want to. So I told Claudia I didn't think it was appropriate for this body to deliberate and that she had done the exact right thing going to all the places she went to, and everybody says it's fine. And so I don't think there's anything we can do to help her. And so that is why I didn't put it on the agenda, which I would have explained to her if she had stayed, but yeah, okay. Anything else? Oh, how about, can we use first names? I would like to do that. Okay,
I'm fine with that.
you're okay with that? Okay. I think we're done. So if anybody wants to make a motion to adjourn?
Yeah. I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, I'm supposed to repeat who says the motion and the,
Hey,
oh, okay.
Adjourning doesn't even have to be seconded. Now that I think,
oh, I don't.
I believe it does, no?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it does.
All right, well,
Well-
learning curve for me. Thank you, everybody.